Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some nuclear revenge. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, there just might be some cookies in your near future, if we can get them away from the chameleon. Alright, our first story today comes to us from golthingdan. 2 for the price of 1. Let's jump right in. So, I was laid off. No big deal, right? It happens. But in this instance, it's a little different. I was working at a tech startup and was one of the early employees. I was one of the key people to develop their technology, which significantly helped enable them to raise tens of millions of dollars. I was told early on that they would basically take care of me as the company grew. Well, for a time at least, the company grew leaps and bounds. Again, much in part to the excellent tech I helped develop. Yet, the company had little concern for little old me. Meanwhile, they brought on a bevy of new managers and high-level people, and yet my career was basically stagnant while I was there. But then, things started to slow down due to economic conditions. There had been a couple of layoffs, and I figured it was probably time to leave the sinking ship. So, I lined up a new position at another company. I then went into my manager and told him that it seemed like more layoffs were imminent and that I had secured a job offer at another company. I asked him if it would be a good idea if I should take it, and he said that he would let me know. A couple of days later, after he had discussed things with the CEO, they said I was okay and not to take the other position. I turned down the other position because I had invested so much of myself into this company, even having sold my house and moved hundreds of miles to work at this company. And I still had a lot of stock options that I was hoping would be worth something someday. Literally a couple of weeks later, guess what? Yep, they laid me off. Now that other position was no longer available, and because this was at the height of the recession, I was out of work for 4 months until I found another position. I could have even lost my house during this time, and I had to sell some cool stuff to keep paying the bills. The new position I finally found was much further from home and was a financial hardship. I would have been better off if they had just been honest with me and told me to take the offer I had in hand previously. But honesty wasn't ever their policy. Anyhow, before I was involuntarily separated from the company, I was working with a Fortune 500 company that was trying to partner with us on some technology. After leaving, I got wind that they were going to invest $15 million in the company. That bothered me for several reasons, mostly because most of us were pretty sure that the crooked CEO was pilfering the company for personal gain. I'm thinking that this guy shouldn't be rewarded for his atrocious management of the company. And honestly, I didn't think that it would be a wise investment for this large company. I contacted my inside guy at the Fortune 500 and told him some of my concerns about the stewardship of the money at the startup, and that it really wasn't a wise investment. This company was looking for a distribution deal for our technology, so I told them the best use of their money would be to make a deal to exchange a large blanket purchase order for stock. This way, the startup company would still get a big chunk of investment money coming in, but they would have to perform for it. It's the difference between giving a kid an allowance for no reason at all, or giving a kid an allowance based on if they did their chores or not. I didn't necessarily want the investors to walk away from a partnership because I had many friends still at the company and didn't want to see them out in the cold. So my thought was that this type of a deal would keep the company afloat while minimizing the potential for pilfering and better protecting the investment. All in all, if structured right, it could be a win-win and make it much more difficult for the crooked CEO and his cronies to loot the company. I additionally told them that I wouldn't recommend investing a penny unless they got a seat on the board of directors. That way, they would have first-hand knowledge of some of the shenanigans going on behind the scenes with their money. That was about it. Now they were armed with some additional information and tactics to perhaps better protect their investment, as well as help ensure that if they did invest, everything would be above board. Sometime later, I heard that the CEO pulled the entire company into the conference room and chewed them a new one. He was furious, because the investor had somewhat done what I had suggested. They had dropped their investment from $15 million to $5 million and had come up with some sort of blanket order or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure, but in essence, it meant a $10 million loss in the mind of the CEO. He's a bit of a fat slob, so it's quite unfortunate that he didn't just have a heart attack right then and there. Not surprising, in the process, the investor was denied the board seat, and one can only guess why, dirty secrets and all. In fact, one of the board members that the CEO did bring on board had already done time for defrauding his clients. A marriage made in heaven, I guess. So, not necessarily meant as revenge, but sweet nonetheless, the company basically lost $10 million because of what they did to me. They were all but expecting this money. Had they not laid me off, I probably wouldn't have even thought about putting the investor's interest above that of the corrupt company. In the end, surprising to no one, the investor eventually got majorly screwed by the unscrupulous startup company anyways. The two companies had some disagreements about their distribution agreement, and the investor ended up having to pay a major settlement to the startup company after a contentious mediation. But never fear, don't screw with a Fortune 500. As the startup company was starting to gasp its last breath, they were working on a promising deal with another company they had identified as a major potential customer, one that would put them back on the track to financial success and further line the CEO's dirty pockets. Well, the Fortune 500 company got wind of the deal, bought the other company, and then shut down the deal. That's ninja level revenge. So in the end, 2 nuclear revenges for the price of 1. I couldn't have been happier to hear about the karmic justice once again hitting the company. Now, the company is all but dead. All physical assets went to auction. The CEO is milking the last few dollars out of the account, but because our SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, is all but worthless, he'll start another venture and the cycle will repeat itself. The sad thing is that the CEO, in my humble opinion, makes Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos, look like Mother Teresa. I pray that one day they do a Netflix docuseries exposing all that went on at this mess of a company. I can guarantee you it would be quite a hit. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Mario's Pants. It says, with all of this information about this startup being a dying, crappy place with a super crappy robber baron CEO, you stuck around because... OP responded to this one and said, because I was one of the original employees and had a ton of stock options, even a modest IPO, and I would have been pretty much set for the rest of my life. It wasn't until some time after I was there that certain things came to light. Since there was financial malfeasance, it was impossible to have a clean audit. Because of that, there was no way to do an IPO or buyout. Had I known that, yes, for sure, I would have bailed. Funny thing too, most of the investors were dumb butts or the CEO wouldn't have gotten away with this. When some of these rumors surfaced, you would think they would demand some clarification and assurance that their investment wasn't being squandered. They didn't. They just buried their heads in the sand and let it all happen. You tend to think wealthy people are intelligent, but none of these were the slightest. Okay, OP, I don't think the investors were the only people that weren't all that smart, because you went on verbal words from these people that they wouldn't get rid of you. Nothing in writing. What you should have done in this case was talk to that CEO, gotten it in writing that they weren't going to fire you, and also in writing that if they did, they would have to pay you out something like 8 months worth of salary so that you could keep your head above water. Also, it sounds like in this case you know a little bit about some of the CEO's shady dealings. I would have hinted towards that in that meeting while asking to get this in writing. Not coming directly out and saying it, but you know, just throwing a little bit of an idea their way. Our next story today comes to us from Background Wave 2513. You're gonna out me as gay to everyone? Prepare to have your entire future go up in flames. Let's jump right in. This was almost 7 years ago. I grew up in a small town from hick country. Always knew I was gay, everyone else is homophobic, was planning on staying in the closet till I move out, etc. You know the song. 7 years ago, a certain senator from Vermont announced his candidacy for president of the United States. And me being the edgy high school senior who couldn't keep his mouth shut, I went all in on the online activism. Mostly on Reddit, but most importantly on Twitter, where I had a fan account with 10,000 followers that I wouldn't shut up about. This didn't go over well with everyone, but people knew my politics and I was just a terminally online 17-year-old high schooler, so no one took it seriously. I guess my parents got a few comments at church, but that was about it. Even at school, I lacked self-awareness and wouldn't shut up about the Democratic primaries. I wasn't antisocial or anything, but most of the people I hung out with were dorkier than me and at least as unself-aware. Here is one thing I didn't account for. If you harass your entire rural hick town to follow your Twitter account, maybe don't use that account to like gay adult material. These were likes from half a year prior, so you had to scroll a while to find them. But a guy from one of my classes, let's call him Alex, went through that trouble and sent screenshots to practically everyone at my school, plus my parents. This wasn't easy for me, but the landing was softer than I expected. My parents took a week or so to adjust, but were eventually fine with it. Other adults in town avoided me, but that wasn't much of a change. And people at school picked on me for a while, but it dwindled down fast. I was still livid with what Alex did, and I wasn't letting it slide. Besides, it wasn't entirely harmless either. My parents were willing to live with it, but were still homophobic and outwardly so. And either way, who wants to have their adult material history shown to their parents? Alex was a top-of-the-class straight-A student with Ivy League aspirations, and definitely Ivy League qualifications. Plus, he could go the legacy route through his dad. His future was also fully dependent on his parents' money. I needed to hit these two aspects of Alex's life and turn them into smoke. Alex's parents were the kind of movie cliche of small-town rich folk, old money. Dad is a lawyer, good standing with the community and the church, conservative, involved in local and state politics, etc. Alex was a spoiled rich kid. Nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but it comes with its fair share of rebellious dumb things you do as a spoiled rich kid. So here's how I used his past to destroy his future. Alex dealt illicit substances for a month when he was 15. Again, he was a well put together valedictorian, so totally out of place, but he just wanted to do something on the edge, I suppose. I knew this because we bought our illicit substances from him through a friend online. He still had the conversations and was more than happy to oblige by handing me the screenshots, which I sent to his parents. They obviously accused me of fabricating them out of revenge, so I asked my friend to show them the conversation firsthand next Sunday after sermon, which he did. A year before outing me, he impregnated a girl who ended up getting an abortion he paid for. With the quid pro quo, she wouldn't say who the father is. It was already too late for her, since her parents knew she was pregnant, so she didn't mind taking the entire fall herself. I knew that girl pretty well. We weren't friends, but we were close politically and would have the occasional discussion. She was livid with Alex for outing me and decided, after I not so subtly suggested it, to do a call-out post on the town's Facebook group with screenshots of their conversations. Alex had an alt-right trolling account that he used to harass people of color. I'm talking words, jokes, IQ graphs, and the like. Multiple people, mostly the one colored kid who went to this school, reported him, but it was practically impossible to prove he was behind the account, until I realized he sometimes logged into it on the school's computers and gave that as a tip to the principal. I'm not sure what the IT guy technically did, but he caught him red-handed and he ended up getting a week's suspension and having to apologize in front of the whole school. So Alex went from model son to junkie baby murdering Nazi overnight. His parents decided to kick him out without a penny after graduation. He still got into an Ivy League school, but without his parents' support, he had to juggle school and a part-time job, and dropped out a year in. He's now apparently a divorced absentee father who's involved with 2 multi-level marketing schemes at once. From a valedictorian who was destined to become a DC lawyer to that. Okay, I'm sitting on the fence for this one because yes, that person went back and outed OP and that's never good. However, OP did like the adult material on that Twitter page in the first place and then use it to become a public figure. Yeah, that's on you, OP. I couldn't help but think through this whole story that OP was destroying this person's life for a mistake that OP made themselves. I'd probably take a different view on this one if OP was just, destroying their lives for all the crappy stuff that they did, not including going back on their Twitter feed, but that's not quite how this happened. So